Hello and welcome to my podcast. Do me a favor, subscribe to the John Keim Report wherever you get your podcasts. If you're watching on YouTube, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button. You can find us there as part of Ampire Media. That's Ampire. Always much appreciated when you tune in. Don't forget, you can read my work on ESPN.com. I have a couple stories up now, a couple things I'm going to talk about here. One of which, though, is about Marshon Lattimore, the potential impact now that he's returning to the Commanders and making his debut. The other story is about again, Lattimore playing, but also Jon Allen's status and how that could change. I'm going to get to that in a minute. And I think it's something you want to pay attention to. So let's get the news of the day first as we go, before I get into my 5 things I think, some of which is about the Saints in this game and a few things on Chase Young. So Marshon Lattimore will play, as I'm sure you know. He's going to start. He's not on some sort of restricted snap count. He's going to be able to play. Let me say, he's looking forward to playing against his former team. I'll get to more of this in a minute, but he will play. Daron Payne did not practice on Friday because of a back issue. He is listed as questionable for Sunday's game against the Saints. And Zane Gonzalez is listed as questionable as well. He was a full participant in practice, and just in case, they signed Greg Joseph to the practice squad, but like I said, Gonzalez was a full participant in practice the last 2 days. He had an issue with his left foot. So there you go. That's the news of the day. And then, last thing is KJ Osborne will be available Sunday, but as Dan Quinn told us, it's hard to imagine him actually being active on Sunday. But yes, he is available. He's making up a lot of ground. Came in, I think he's impressed Quinn and the others with how he's approached his week or the couple of days since he was claimed off waivers after the Patriots waived him. And I think he's impressed him. But like, this is kind of his reputation. He has a good reputation. I think down the stretch he can help in various ways. And again, I'll get to more of this stuff in a few minutes. So anyways, let's get to my 5 things I think. I'm going to start with, I think there's a very good chance that Jon Allen returns this season. Now, that was the news story I had up on ESPN.com. So I want to go a little bit more into that right now. So we know that he was considered lost for the year after he tore his left pectoral muscle. He underwent surgery. And again, at that time, it was determined that, hey, he's pretty much done for the year. Well, not as Lee Corso said, not so fast, my friends, because there is a definite chance that he returns. What's the percentage? Maybe it's 50-50. I don't know. And it's hard. I don't necessarily like giving percentages, but what I do know is that, and certainly he is working toward coming back. That's what I know. There's not ruled out, and there's a chance that he would be back by the end of the month. I think the goal for him would be to return to practice next week, where they, then open that 21-day window. If again, that's the goal. And then you practice, next week before the Eagles game, you practice another week, and you get back out there for the Falcons game and the Cowboys game. Get ready for the postseason. So, in an ideal world, that's how it develops for Jon Allen. Again, I don't know the likelihood of this happening, but it's not ruled out. So part of the reason it's not ruled out is because during surgery, the doctors found that it was not a full tear. In fact, it was only a partial tear, and it was again, a very partial tear. So certainly less than a 50% tear, maybe even down below 30% tear. That's why he's in this position, because the key then will be, do you get your strength back? He's already been running. He is lifting. The key can he get to get his strength back? And if he can, then I think you will see him out in the field. And again, I think the desire would be get out there, play a couple games, get your footing back, get everything back before the playoffs, if they indeed make it there, as they should, given the schedule, but also given the way we're playing. So if nothing else, man, this would add quality depth for the Commanders. And whether he starts, whether he comes off, whatever, I don't know how that would go. But what I do know is Phidarian Mathis certainly somewhat I don't know about fell out of favor, but was going in the wrong direction because they made him inactive against Tennessee, and they had Carl Davis up. They also have Sheldon Day, whom they like. Like Dan Quinn said earlier this week, he called him a glue guy not just because of the way he plays per se, but because of the way he prepares, the way he is in the building, and the way he is with his teammates and in that room. That's why he's considered a glue guy. So anyways, again, with Jon Allen, that would be a welcome return as they get ready for the postseason, because if nothing else, you would be adding a quality defensive tackle at a time of the year where a lot of guys are banged up, and you would be getting a guy back to join with adding a guy like Marshon Lattimore for this stretch run. It can only help this defense. How much better it would make it, we will see, because we know that with him out there, there were still some struggles, not necessarily because of him, because the struggles have continued against the run, especially. So, but there you go. So a definite chance that he comes back. Nothing is guaranteed. Still more to go. But would it shock me if he came back? No, not at all. And again, the first step would be, do they open that 21-day window? And when, in an ideal world, they would do it next week, allowing him to practice for a couple weeks, and then making a decision about can he or can he not, and then going from there. So there you go. Number two, I think Tyler Biadasz may have been clearly was one of their best signings this offseason, has been an underrated standout for the Commanders. In fact, I was talking to somebody who was, who very familiar with his game, was in on the whole process, and thinks that he was a huge signing in the offseason, and for a couple of reasons. And talking to guys about him, a couple of things that they would point out. One, I talked to Nick Allegretti. He talked about how much Biadasz loves football. And so it's funny that, guys bring that up, but it's just, you say that because not everybody there loves football. And if you love it, then you embrace the process. And I think that's what Biadasz does. So he is very much like a quarterback of that offensive line, very much like what Bobby Wagner is for the defense, right? And especially in the middle. So just in terms of film study, in terms of preparation. Now, look at the guys that they have would be considered the quarterbacks, including the real quarterback, Jayden Daniels, a guy who prepares in a massive way. Bobby Wagner, same kind of guy. Tyler Biadasz, same kind of guy. I don't know when the last time they would have had three guys in those key spots and where preparation is key, that they've had three guys like this who prepare to the levels they do. It's why you see a smoother operation on offense. It's why you don't see a lot of times where they're really, really confused by what they're seeing. And I think that's because of what Biadasz does and because of Jayden Daniels, because they work in conjunction to get the protection set. In some cases, sometimes it's all on the quarterback, sometimes it's on the center. These two work together, but it starts with Biadasz knowing what to do. And even, I can't remember who it was, pointed out the touchdown run by Brian Robinson against the Titans last game, and just how the Titans slanted their D-line in that play. You did not see Washington's offensive line be fooled by what they saw. In fact, they adjusted pretty well to it, and some of that comes back to preparation, the play call, et cetera, but also I think the center play. And then I think the other thing that jumps out is the way he competes. And you see this, like you'll see a double team with he and Allegretti, and the way Biadasz fights to get in position to win that battle. And so, as someone else told me, it doesn't always look pretty like that, but you see him the way he is, as this guy said, fights his ass off to get in front of him to win that battle. That's another thing. Not perfect, but it jumps out to his teammates. And again, then it's the understanding of the whole offense and just what Washington's motion does to the defense and how they can adjust accordingly with alerts or whatever. So, and then it goes back to protecting the quarterback, and the last thing that people have talked about, he makes the calls with confidence. So it's one player's like he's been with centers who don't always do that. And you'd be surprised, man. But if you make the call with confidence, guys are confident then in you and then what they're doing. If you're unsure, they're going to be a little bit unsure because why isn't he saying this with more confidence? So, but those are all little things, but it explains why Biadasz has been a key signing in the middle, because they have not had that. They did not have that with Gates last year. Not so much that he wasn't confident, he wasn't as good. But so it's been a big upgrade. And when you look at this offensive line and why they're better in the run game, better in some areas, you can look at Biadasz and say it starts there. Number three, I think Marshon Lattimore is going to make an impact Sunday. How's that for an I think? But I think you can look at, there are a couple of reasons why you can look at why he may have that impact, and maybe even more so than if he had played several games ago, and certainly could have used him in some of those games against Pittsburgh, against Dallas, whatever. But I think the fact that he's had that time to prepare in the classroom, in the walkthroughs and then getting really, a full week of practice this week, getting a partial week of practice last before the bye, and continuing to get the classroom work in. I think that's where that's where it can be an advantage for him having missed it. If you want to find the silver lining, it's that he should be in a further spot with the defense when he first steps on the field. And that's going to help in things like with communication, understanding what the play calls are, because it's not just about lining up and just locking down your guy. They're not going to play man every single play. They will probably, I wouldn't be surprised if they play it more. Joe Witt did say, he's like, I asked him the other day, if you use more pressure packages now that you have Lattimore? He's like, I don't think we can use more. Like he feels like they use a lot. Now, when you're sending 5-man rushes, they're kind of middle of the pack. So it wouldn't shock me if they did a little bit more of that. But it also allows like defensive linemen to get that extra split second to get home, because maybe you have a guy who can cover just a little bit longer, or cover longer off the line, right? In a press jam situation. But it also comes back to communication. This is one of the things that I think is going to be key, because you see, it's not just a matter of, you get up there and lock down your guy, because you're going to see motions to stacks, motions to bunches. How do you handle it in this defense? So you need guys who can communicate with him. And that's Quan Martin. That's Mike Samerstill. That's all those guys, Jeremy Chin. So all those guys have to be very communicative. And the good thing for him is that Quan Martin is really good in that. Samerstill is excellent in that. So I think that's among others, right? But I think that's going to be a big key for Lattimore to succeed, is to get on that quote unquote same page. And even he said, like, he can go out there right now, it feels really good, but you've got to get out there and see how it is, for sure, because you don't know until you get out there. And it's just, again, even with like Quan Martin, the safety corner relationship is a key one, because especially when you have a guy who can do what Lattimore does. I remember when Josh Norman was here and Will Blackman was playing center, and he would talk about this, like, it's like sometimes you just got to tell, sometimes a corner may expect help on a certain coverage, but you may have to shout like, hey, listen, man, you're on your own here. I've got to help over here because we're seeing this look over here, whatever. So like, but you have to know, what can this corner do and how does he like to play off the safety, et cetera, to know how you react in a game situation. And the only way you learn that is by going through it. And to be honest, this is a good game for him to go through it, because it's not like the Saints are going to have this prolific offense. So you can you can work on a lot of things before you start to get to some better passing attacks over the next couple of weeks. Just because, but I do think that communication will be key. And I know with Quan Martin, again, good communicator, but even he said that what it's going to allow him to do is cheat sometimes. If you're in man over here and you may have zone over here, or even man over here, but you can cheat a little bit to that side, knowing that Lattimore's over on the other side to lock a guy down. Now, will they have him travel with the guy? That I don't know. And he has not been doing that. I don't know that they're going to need to do that, but it just depends on the matchup, I would assume. Who's going to start opposite them? Well, we don't know that either. They didn't say, but it would make sense if Mike Samerstill does, because he's been playing the best outside of the corners, and that's why they started to rotate St. Juste with Mike Davis. So, but we'll see how that unfolds. But I do think that Lattimore is going to be obviously a very good addition. Now, it's funny because I talked to one offensive coach who did face the Saints earlier this year, and he thought maybe was Lattimore playing as well as he had in the past. He wasn't so sure of that. I will say the Commanders feel pretty confident that he is. That's why they traded for him. They knew, and that's why they were patient waiting for him, because they knew, I do believe when they traded for him, they knew it would be several weeks, because with the hamstring, it always takes longer, right? So I think they knew it may take this long, but that's why they're willing to trade for him, because what they saw on tape was certainly something that enticed them. So I think you can rely on that. But again, I think that communication aspect is going to be a big factor for him. If I'm the Saints, I'm going to test that right away. Even though they know how he is, they know who he is very well. I think you want to test, how is he in this defense? Where is he at in this defense in terms of his knowledge of the rules? If you see this, how do you play this off, right? So there's always going to be situations like that for sure. But even after, like I said, I told with the one opposing coach that it's one opposing coach. Others have said that they really like it, and so we'll see what happens. But I think it's one thing too. One thing I also liked about in talking to Lattimore on Friday, and just getting to, hearing about him, knowing some about him, about his background, all that, is the confidence that he has. And I can tell you, like, I don't know that I felt that from a corner here in a long, long time. And you may even have to go back to a guy like Champ Bailey to really get the kind of confidence I think that Lattimore has. Now, D'Angelo Hall had some. I don't think it's the same thing. Like, I sometimes thought, I wasn't sure if it was misplaced or not too sometimes. I thought he had definitely some confidence. I just think Lattimore has a lot of it, to the point where he said, like, his goal is to show that he is the best player on the field. Like, you don't always get guys saying it to that degree, but I think when he says it, I believe that he means it. So, and I think the other thing is, for sure, is that he feels like this is and listen, this is a good thing for Washington, but listen to what he says right here about going back to face the Saints.
Just us playing together in the back end and around me. They know what's going on, so they know to communicate with me. I'm new to the team, so certain calls I'm not gonna know at the bat. They gotta tell me, and they know that. So I feel like we good, and me and the guy, we don't have no problems. Everybody good, so I feel like it's gonna be good.
So that's the kind of guy I think you want to have on your roster, and that's what Lattimore adds. And I think we start to get to see it. I think this is a good chance for him to get his quote unquote feet wet, and then get into now. Then you have the Eagles coming up. Then you have the Falcons coming up. Those are major key games, of course. Eagles as much. I don't think they're going to win the division, but I think it's as much just to go see how you go toe to toe against a team that had beat you earlier this year. And then the Falcons, of course, because I think that depending if the Falcons win the next two games, that's definitely for a big game for the playoff race, because if the Falcons win out, they win the tiebreak over Washington if they're both 10-7. Washington is in a good spot though, against other teams. They're in a good spot against the Rams for the playoff tiebreakers. They're in a good spot against the Seahawks if they end up tied with them, and against the Cardinals if they tie with them. The one team right now that could get the tiebreaker over them is Atlanta if they win that game. That's why it's a big game, and that's why it'll be good to have Lattimore back playing in that one with a couple games under his belt when you face off against a guy like Drake London. Anyways, so number 4, I think they're going to have to adjust a few things just to adapt to the loss of Noah Brown, and then also coupled with the loss of Austin Ekeler. Now, I will say with Ekeler, and so again, it's not just one. Like, Noah Brown was having a good year, but we're not talking about losing Jamar Chase out of your offense. I just think there were some things that he did that really are specific to him. But I do think you have guys here that can do things very well. And I think the other thing is Cliff Kingsbury is excellent at finding what a guy does and then using that and then getting out of different packages. It's not like they have a ton of plays. It's just that the way they get to them is very good. And then also I think they have a lot of like subsets off these plays. So you can run quote unquote the same plays, but from multiple looks or sets. And that I think that enables him to use guys in very specific ways. And so I would assume that they can do that. And it's funny because with Kingsbury, that's one thing that guys love about him, is that he's creative, but also they players and coaches will talk about how he uses guys to the best of their ability, or just to find something like, hey, this guy can do this. Let's create a package for him. And he's also a very decisive guy. And I think, I think it's why you don't see any hiccups in the operation with the rookie quarterback, in part because of how decisive he is making a play call, or if it's even like getting a play in the playbook or taking it out, putting it in, it's boom, it's out, let's go. So I think all that stuff helps. But I go back to losing Noah Brown and not having Austin Ekeler available for the time being. I think then it forces you to then, okay, who else can you now turn to make some plays, because both those guys could do that. And by the way, one thing to note about Ekeler, he was outside of practice this week, and so not obviously he can't practice yet. He's on IR, et cetera. But I think it was good to see him out there. I don't know what it means for going forward. It might, I think there's still, let's see how he is at the end of that, because that was a serious concussion. But just to note that. I think what this does though is it puts a lot more importance on the run game, and I think it's why it's good how well they've done this year and the emphasis they've put on it. So 3 of the last 4 games are against teams that allow 4.4 yards or worse against the run, including the Saints, who allow 5 yards per carry. pretty bad, folks. So that's why I think, you can see a lot more. The reliance on the run game is going to be key. Dallas 4.8 per, Atlanta 4.4 per. All of them rank 17th or lower. And then even in rushing yards per game, all of them are 17th or worse in rushing yards per game for a reason. Now I know Dallas was like that. They didn't, couldn't take advantage the first time. I think over the next 4 weeks, you'll see a better job with that. But losing Noah Brown hurts, but I think getting KJ Osborne, he can do some things for you. He's not Noah Brown, but he can block. He can run routes from different spots. He can play inside. He can play outside. All that's going to help. And now, again, I don't think he'll play this weekend, but when he's up to speed, I think he can find some packages for him. Same with Luke McCaffrey. We know that he can do some things. I think De'Ami Brown's going to be a guy to watch here for sure. And I think, he's someone who's been waiting and waiting for opportunities, and this is going to be a good one for him. This has been a productive year for him so far, but I think he's going to get more of a chance, and he's really been really good on those screens and just physical. So he and Brown offer that physical play. And the other thing that he does too is just like Brown, like Noah Brown, both these guys, and I've talked about this against Tennessee, but you'll see sometimes they're using the receivers as lead blockers through the hole. It's just a different look. And it's like I said, same play, the different look, or a guy running it differently. And it just creates some confusion in the defense. They did that. De'Ami told me he did that. I think it was 3 times against Tennessee. And it works. It's a nice job, but it gets a guy quick through the hole, but it's just a different look, and it creates a different package for the defense to defend. And so, but he can do that. Noah Brown did that. De'Ami can get down the field. We've seen that. Obviously, he has good speed, but it's that toughness inside, I think, that's going to help them as well. And then depending on Jamison Crowder, he's listed as questionable for this week. Don't know if he'll be up, but he offers a guy who can win quick off the ball, something they really haven't had with him out there. And then there's also Terry McLaurin. So how can you get more from him? In fact, here's what McLaurin had to say about how he feels he can do more down the stretch.
I think I still have a lot of room to give more, and a lot that I still expect of myself, just to be the guy down the stretch that can make the plays when we need it. When defenses expect third down, got to have a situation they may know the ball's coming my way, but still being able to make that play, still being in a position to be moved around the right to left slot, and just be a versatile piece, asset to our offense. And also just being a great teammate, supporting the guys. Like I said, we may not have a lot of guys in the receiver room have played a whole lot, but it's an exciting opportunity for them. So just being supportive of them, cheering them on, and then being great in the run game. I think I've really improved over the course of the season, just staying connected on blocks, giving the running backs chances to break those runs, and just finishing down the field. So just being the leader that I can, not just in my ability, but when I don't have the ball in my hand, with the things that I'm saying to my teammates, with the things I'm saying to our receiver group, and just being the high energy guy that I feel like I am.
So with McLaurin, we saw last game against the Titans, they moved him around a little bit more. It wasn't a ton more, but it was enough more to maybe create a little bit more, a few more things for the defense to worry about. And it's funny because I think the one game where it killed them was Philadelphia, but I think it's a good thing to continue. It doesn't have to be a 50-50, 60-40 split, but it can't be 80 or 90, 80-20, 90-10, which is where it was kind of for the first part for most of the year. And it just creates a different look for the defense. You don't want to always know where he's at, because then you can adjust accordingly. That's what the Eagles did. They knew where he was always going to be. You could see by the drops of the linebackers, other corners, how they could play him. And it just gives you, maybe if you're not traveling with him, it puts another corner on you that has to know, how do you defend Terry McLaurin? Maybe you created an matchup advantage by doing that with a guy who maybe is used to seeing him, and then McLaurin can then benefit off of that. So that's another way you can do some things too, and maybe get him on the run, move a little bit more, etc. But then again, it goes back to Brian Robinson and the run game, because I do think that's a big key. Anytime anybody asks me this week, what's the key to this game? I think it's always going to go back to the run game, because that's how they're going to power this offense. And it's funny because I like talking to Brian Robinson about just like, what is the difference here? Is there a difference in the run game? Is it, whatever? Is obviously we know they're calling it more. And he's like, there are only a handful of run plays that you really can call, or run schemes that you can really use. So it's really not about that, as he said. And well, this is what he said. He said it's all about trust. So here's what he had to say.
think just trusting it a little more. Just trusting the run game a little more. Just knowing what we're capable of. Giving it a chance and just finding the balance within it. And I just feel like we've done that. Done a great job of that. Throughout the season. We've grown. We've learned. More about our unit, and I'm just glad that everybody sees and recognize and try to adjust based off what they know we can do.
So that's the key. Just being able to trust your run game and commit to it certainly has led to better results. Now, I also think that by doing this, it keeps the defense a lot more off balance. I think Andrew Wiley is a better run blocker than he's a pass blocker. I think I'll go back to Biadasz. I think Allegretti, I think Coleman are good in that role. And I think the receivers did a really good job. In fact, and Terry McLaurin has done a better job. I talked at times about how he's been inconsistent, but he has been better this year than he has been in the past. And I think that one thing that I say always helps getting him involved early. I think it keeps him involved in every aspect of the offense, including the run blocking. So I think that's key, but that's also been a factor in the run game improvement is just getting more guys to contribute to it. It can't just be on the front five. It's just on the front five. You're going to have some tough times. I do think Kingsbury does a good job with creating some different looks and running off that when you get that little, I don't even know what to call it, but it's an eye formation next to the quarterback. So I think it's the off eye, not offset eye, but the off eye. So, but even in that, like where is he going to go? Who's going to get it? You may have McNichols and Brian Robinson there, and that's certainly that's going to cause a little bit of confusion. If you can, sometimes it's just a matter of a little shift here and there. Maybe you shift Robinson from the left to the right, and you watch the way the defense shifts. And a lot of times with Kingsbury, it creates a better blocking angle for alignment on that particular play. And that's all it takes. So little things like that, but it's why the run game has been working. And I think, again, it's how you use guys, but there you go. So let's get to number 5. And so number 5, I think Jayden's going to have a big game. Oh, okay. Wow. What a prediction. It's also because the Saints are just not in a position to beat, I think, a team that is good, right? So, and I know Washington, you can listen, they're 8-5. They're a good team and they're beating the teams they should. They're winning the way they should. The only real hiccup this year has been, to me, Dallas. And so, but I'm not anticipating that this week. And I do want to, like with Jayden going back to New Orleans, guys like that kind of rise to the moment. It's going back to the Monday night game and some of those other games, some moments for him where it's like he just happens to rise to the moment. And I think that's what's going to happen here. The Saints have the 28th rated pass defense. And the big key here, and this is why I say this, and again, I still go back to the run game, I think is going to be the big key, but I do expect some big plays by this offense, in part because when you watch the Saints, I'll be curious, how do the Saints defend him? Because they've rushed the third most times. Excuse me, let me back up a minute because that's a little bit confusing. They have used the third most 4-man rushes in the NFL. The teams that have really kind of gotten to them have used 5-man rushes, blitzes, whatever. So I'll be curious to see if they stick with that sort of mentality. But what you also see when they rush is leaving big gaps in the rush lanes. They're not a disciplined group in that regard. So you'll see gaps to run out of there, which means you got chances to run for big gains. Or if you keep your eyes upfield, you've got a chance for big gains. I've seen quarterbacks who do both. A couple weeks, last week, Drew Lock had several long runs because of this. And then a couple weeks ago, it was Jameis Winston. He's not going to run, but he's going to keep his eyes upfield. And he threw, I think it was like an 89-yard touchdown pass and then another long touchdown pass, simply because he broke contain, gets upfield, keeps his eyes up, and sees guys downfield. And I know in talking to some guys here, they kind of anticipate that possible opportunity as well. So just something to watch. I think that's why I figure he's going to have a big game. They have some, it's not a terrible defense by any means, and they've been playing better at times of late. Kool-Aid McKinstry is not a bad corner, but I do think you can take advantage of some of what they do defensively with, certainly down the field. They have allowed the 6th most pass plays of 20+ yards. So again, I think I'm going to test them down there with whether it's with McLaurin, whether it's with De'Ami Brown, whomever it is. I think you have that opportunity. I saw some success on these deep crossers because guys ran away from some of the coverage. There was sometimes some confusion deep in the secondary that led to some of those big plays. So I think they can definitely do that. And, I think that's something to watch for sure. And, I think some of this, and it's funny because like Daniel's in these situations, going back to, where he played college ball, et cetera, or at least where he starred in college or made a big name for himself. He's not going to get overwhelmed by the moment. This is a kid who's really mature. And I think, there are a lot of examples of that throughout the year, but I think that's a big key going into a game like this because of how he approaches things. He's not going to go out there and try to prove something. He's just going to go do it because naturally that's just who he is. So anyways, and I'm going to get to Chase Young in a minute because I want to talk a little bit about the pass rush. Actually, well, let's do that now because one of the things, and I'll get to the Saints offense in a minute, there's really only one guy you need to worry about. But with Chase Young, he is having a better year. And it's funny because when I watched some of his pass rushes, it reminded me of how he was playing before he got traded to San Francisco. I didn't think he was as effective in San Francisco rushing the passer in terms of pressure percentage, et cetera, as he was here before the trade. And I think he's getting back to that a little bit, but it's funny how sometimes we use True Media and watching him like last week against the Giants, he had 8 quarterback pressures. That's 8 wins as a pass rusher, right? That's a lot. Like that was one of his higher games of the season. So you kind of go back and look at what did he do to win those? Well, I say of those 8, I'd say 3 of them, I'm tossing out the window. I don't think they're necessarily great pass rushes in some case, because it's too often like you're coming close to the quarterback, but you're really not threatening the quarterback. Maybe you're getting up too high and you kind of run by them, but they're getting rid of the ball. They don't really necessarily feel your presence, right? And I think you see that because sometimes like he might get up to that 8-yard, 9-yard mark or 8 yards and try to curl and turn. So that pushes you out another yard. Well, the ideal thing is 7 to 7.5, so about 7.5 yards and cutting in. And that's where sometimes I think where you end up getting him maybe widening that pocket a little bit, or excuse me, widening his rush, which then opens up an escape lane for the quarterback, or a passing lane if nothing else. So, but it's not like, when them watching him against the Giants, like there's sometimes like you see the violent hands, you see the speed, and just like, again, the violent hands getting around him, sometimes attacking half the offensive guy. That was a big thing for them here early in his career. Like when they felt he started to make a jump as a rookie, it's when they said, hey, attack half the guy, attack half the tackle, pick a half and attack that side, because it gets them to open up one way or another rather than going straight on all the time. Well, they can oftentimes defend that. So he did have a decent game. I do think he's someone to watch. Primarily, he's been playing on the right side, so that would be going against Coleman. It wouldn't shock me if they chip him, certainly if more than a few times. The Saints have, they still have guys who can hurt you on that defense. They got they got Matthew in the back, Honey Badger in the backfield. So there are guys there that are pretty good. Their linebackers can be aggressive, so you can get some boots maybe on them, et cetera. And I saw some success by other teams with that. But as far as Chase Young goes, and the funny thing is too, with that trade, getting rid of he and Montez Sweat, you don't hear a lot about. It's funny, we were talking about this in the locker room too. You just don't hear a lot about Chase Young here, or even the fact that he's playing his former team. And how the defensive ends, blah, blah, blah. And when you look at the decision to trade both those guys, and I still think like Montez Sweat would be nice to have, but the Bears are paying him $25 million, and Dante Fowler has more than, I think, maybe double his sack total. And I think Dorrance Armstrong is giving him enough and they really like Armstrong. Armstrong's a smart guy. I think that really helps. Not that Montez Sweat wasn't, but I think when you look at the money they paid Montez Sweat, well, by not paying him, now, could you have afforded that? Yes. And then could you have afforded more guys? Well, probably, but would you have gotten all these guys? They got Wagner, they got Biadasz, they got, Jeremy Chin, Allegretti, multiple guys. They probably got about 6 or 7 guys, about 6 guys, maybe 7, who are starters for the price of what Montez Sweat got. So, and if you're going to get that kind of money as a defensive end, to me, you've got to be getting double-digit sacks more often. So that's not to say like this isn't in hindsight thing. I think it would have been nice to be able to keep him. I just think that price, and when you see the production this year, it's not what. Go ask the Bears fans about that. So, but going back to Chase Young, I just think that he's being Chase Young, and I think he can threaten this team for sure. So, just somebody to watch. Meanwhile, for the Saints offense, Jake Haener is going to be playing quarterback, folks. He's thrown, I think, 29 career passes. So there's not a lot to go on there. for him, not a great arm, not a great athlete. I think, he's going to have to get rid of the ball quick. I think you can pressure him. The key will be stopping running back Alvin Kamara, because that's their offense right now. And he is a really good running back, as you know. So watching him against like the Rams. So the Rams, he did a great job against the Rams, and the Giants did a great job against him. So against the Rams, you could see him creating some lighter boxes, but also a lot of double teams up front. And I think like that makes a difference. I also think when against the Rams, what the Saints were able to do is create a lot of, again, double team blocking, but they also caused hesitation by the linebackers. You could see like they were waiting to see where's Kamara going to cut. He's a really good one cut runner, created a lot of arm tackles against them because the linebackers were just a little bit slower or hesitant to fill certain gaps until they knew, right? And it's so that it allowed blockers to get up to them, or it created arm tackle attempts. Then you look at the Giants. The Giants did a really good job against them. In fact, 3 of his first 4 runs against them were lost yards. And part of that goes back to the box that they created. Like against a 7-man box, which is, it's hard to get those 8-man boxes because teams can spread you out, but you get 7 in there, that's pretty good. So against those boxes, like he was averaging like two yards a carry. I think for the season, it's about 3.8. So that's a good way to do it. But the Giants also used a lot of, I don't know how many it was, but a lot of 5-man defensive line fronts. What they were able to do is create more one-on-one situations for the blocking, the linebackers getting up there and filling and beating some of the, like it was harder to double team up there. So you're getting to your guy, but it created a lot of one-on-one situations. They moved the right guard back a few times and set the edge very well. So that's another key. Set the edge well, make him bounce a little bit wider and allow the help to get there. And I think that's something that the Giants did well. It's a good thing to copy here. So I'm curious to see how they attack him, if they indeed use some of those sets, or if it's just, but again, it starts with setting a really good edge on the outside, because he is a terrific one-cut runner, and he's going to get you flowing. He's going to attack the outside, and he cuts really quick. And so I think that's where you can hurt him. But listen, against the Rams, he was doing really well for 3 quarters. I mean, I'm watching the tape and he's getting like big run here, big run there, big run there. Well, it's early in the 4th quarter and the Saints had 6 points. So they don't have a lot of ways to really threaten you. Losing Taysom Hill, big deal. He's a really good as a fullback for him, and they still use a fullback for him, but it's just still not the same threat, because with Taysom Hill, you can use him in different ways. So it's just a little bit different when he's not in the game, very much, or very different. And then, so that was a loss there. They don't have any receivers who they don't have they've lost their top 2 receivers. Olave's out. They do have Marquez Valdes-Scantling, and he's a fast guy. 3 of his 4, he's got 4 touchdown catches for them. 3 of them are for 20 yards or more. And so usually in those situations, it really like some crossers using that speed. I think one way may have been, on a bootleg, just getting him in an intermediate crosser off a bootleg. Just if you use a gap, he's going to find it, and he can go the distance. So he's a guy you have to be aware of. But everything here starts with Kamara. If you can kind of slow him down, then you're obviously going to have a lot of success, because there's really nothing else. I just don't see how this pass game should threaten them consistently to make it dangerous for them. So anyways, there you go. This is a game they got to win. This is a game I think they will win. And I think we're looking at another situation where it's like, I think they take care of business. They've been really good all year about taking care of business, except for one game, and we know that game. And I think this is one where they do that. So anyway, that's all I got for me. I will be back after the game, of course, wrapping up the Commander Saints game with another episode. So I'll talk to you next time.